MC for this evening, the one, the only, Carl Chinnery. Come on up, Carl.
We're indeed privileged tonight to have four good storytellers. And I'll start off by just having them introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll get to the stories. First one is Randy Weeda.
My parents moved here in 1956. I was born in 1957 at the Lee Summit Sanitarium when the population was 2,500.
And I was also born in Lee Summit at Baptist Hospital when I was born, and raised here. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my family. I think some of you might know some members of them.
Bob Johnson, and I was not born here. And, we moved here in late 1970, but our daughter, Christy Johnson Ware, and her husband, Jason back there, she was born here. But yes, Susie and I moved here from Kansas City.
I'm Dymon Wood. My grandfather farmed Lee Summit. My father was captain of the Lee Summit football team, and I've been here for 75 years. So, that's it.
2 years older than me. Some things are funny. I was handed this before we started. Miller Street Junior High, standing around trying to be cool. Yes, there we all stood, when in strolled Dymon Wood. All the girls wanted to be with him. The boys wanted to be him. The looks, the smile, the hair. He was so debonair. So where is Dymon Wood today? Did he go far away? Does anyone really know? Still king of cool in Lee Summit, where he helps it grow. And would you all stand up who were in his class? We'll start with Randy. Randy, share about growing up on Pinell and 3rd Street.
So I grew up at 307 South Pinell, which is right off of 3rd Street, Pinell, and then Milmar comes back the other way. Gina grew up on Milmar. I grew up on Pinell, and so we were all kind of in the same neighborhood. I moved there when I was 6 years old and stayed till I was 16 years old. Most of my friends' dads worked at Western Electric, and one of the things about Western Electric, you didn't want to be around there during a shift change because you had an instant traffic jam in Lee Summit. That doesn't really happen like that anymore. But I really enjoyed that neighborhood. There was a swimming pool called the White Ridge Swimming Pool that Gina and I and several of us, Tom Zamar, her brother, grew up and spent all of our time. And Francis Titus ran that pool, and he gave swimming lessons. And the way he gave us swimming lessons, he just threw you in the pool and you'd figure out a way to get back. So that's kind of the start of it. And in 1965, my uncle, Asa Steen, ran for chief of police. Back then you had to run for chief of police just like the sheriff does now. And I remember putting billboards out and signs out. So that was my first experience in politics, is putting signs out for him to run for that. Ben Sharp, who had Sharp Long at one time, also was on the police force underneath my uncle Asa Steen. So those are some of the things that I remember initially from growing up on Pinell.
Kim, share about your memories as a student in elementary school in Lee Summit.
Well, I went to Westview Elementary. We lived in Brayside, so I walked to school every day and walked home. Actually walked home for lunch. which, especially as a retired educator, there's no way you would do that now. We just left. I keep thinking about this. We just left the building and I walked home by myself and go have lunch. Loved it. Some of you may remember Marcel Johnson, which that's my mom's sister, my aunt, and she was a secretary. I didn't find out until much later in life that my best friend growing up, who is back here today, we were always in the same class until 6th grade. And we've been best friends since 1st grade. And come to find out, my aunt was making sure that we were getting on the same class list. But I didn't know that then. But she didn't in 6th grade because she needed to prepare us for junior high so that we were ready to go.
Bob, what brought you to Lee Summit? And we're all ruined that day.
Thanks, Carl. Yes, I attended college at the University of Central Missouri, as did a future friend that I met who lived across the hall, John Rep. And some of you may have had John Rep as a physical education instructor. So we became very good friends. The long and short of this is we both stayed on for our master's degrees right after our bachelor's degrees. I went to St. Louis County after that and taught at one of the community colleges. And John, of course, stayed here. The point being, as we returned back to the Kansas City area, we meet with John and his wife, and they had built a house in Lee Summit. And we thought this was a really nice community, so when we moved back, well, not back, when we moved back from St. Louis, we had a house built for us in Olean Acres, and we have lived on the east side of 71 bypass / 291 ever since we've been here. And so John Rep was really responsible for us getting to know Lee Summit and moving here in the latter part of 1970.
Dymon, share about working for Lula Long Combs at Longview Farm.
It was one of my very first jobs. We would drive out to Longview. We were the mowers, the yard workers. I carried little air conditioners up to the 2nd and 3rd floor of the mansion for her. There was 3 of us. We washed the Cadillac that was in the garage, and it was a very interesting job because we were around the man who ran the whole system. His name was Mr. Buell, and they had their own oil wells. They generated their water. They were a fully operational city, and so it was a very interesting job. And it was, I have no idea how much we were paid an hour, but at the time we were just really happy. And of course they fed us and they brought treats and they brought a lot of things, and it was very interesting to see how it all worked, how they did the stables, how all of the animals were kept, and it was one of my favorite jobs that I had. Luckily I didn't get the bell.
Ready to tell about your first job as a 16-year-old at Phillips 66.
Kim, you notice I'm the only one following directions?
I know you're doing a great man.
My first job when I was 16 years old, which is I think 1973, was at a Phillips 66 at 3rd and Ward that was operated and owned by Jennifer Lopez's dad. And that was he taught me everything I knew. I had no idea where the gas tank was. I didn't know how to put air in a tire. And it was a full service gas station. And I worked for her dad, her grandpa Ira, and her brother Cliff. All 3 of those have passed on since then. But it's such great memories for me as a child to have such a good experience when you're starting out. It was also during the oil embargo. Remember when you had to get gas early in the day because we had to close the pumps in the afternoon because we didn't have enough gas to get us through? Unless you were a regular. Richard Goebel, who used to have a plumbing business, he was one of our regulars. And so we had certain regulars that we'd sneak in some gas even though, we didn't have enough of it. But I changed tires, and every time somebody came in for gas, you checked their oil, you washed the windshield, you checked their air in their tire, you checked their oil, you did everything, including putting the gas in. There was no self-service gas stations at that time. So I really enjoyed that time. My dad helped give me that job because he knew Jerry Maxwell very well. And Ira, her grandpa, he was an interesting individual, just an old guy with a little mustache and a little white flat top. And he had an old vehicle, the windshield washer didn't work, so he had a bottle of windshield fluid. And whenever he needed windshield fluid, he'd just stick his arm down and spray the windshield, turn the wipers on. So it was just a very good time in my life, and one of those, I just wish I had pictures of that. You know, that time nobody took pictures of anything. Now we got it all different.
Kim, tell about your church life growing up in a small town called Lee Summit.
There are a lot of differences in growing up in a small town, as most of you know, in a large city that we live in today. But one of the things that, and I've had discussions with people that have lived here a while, everyone I knew growing up went to church, and you were very loyal to that church, that denomination. And we went to First Baptist. Brother Bright lived right around the corner from us, so you knew the minister well. My father served as a deacon there, and you went, if the doors were open, you were there. It was a Sunday night, Sunday morning, Wednesday night, you were there. But there weren't anything like any soccer games planned during that time. I mean, those were kind of what I would consider sacred times growing up, that I have to admit I miss that now, because, my kids, you know, have young kids now too, and so they don't know what that was like to have those times reserved just for that purpose. And so I appreciate that, and I kind of wish it was that way still, but I probably could say that about a lot of things anymore.
Bob, why did you decide to run for political office?
Yes, well, this is the real story. I was going to make a crazy comment first. But from 68 to 70 was the time period that I was teaching in St. Louis County. And at that point, I met Kit Bond and Jack Danforth, and then some of the local legislators. And I was just kind of impressed with the idea of whether it's service in the U.S. Congress. By the way, what I'm saying now is reference to 1970, not today, because I don't have a lot of respect for what's happening in politics today. That aside, I thought about when we returned to the Kansas City area, I might want to consider running for the legislature. And as far as Lisa, I don't know if any of you remember Les Olson by any chance, way back in the late. I met Les in the early 70s when we moved here. And Les was talking to me about politics. He'd run for Congress a couple times, and through Les's encouragement and introducing some people, that's when I decided that I would run for the House. And so in 1972, I did run for the House of Representatives. From all of Lee Summit was included in that district. And thankfully, we did win that election. And but that's what just me and some people prior to 1972 decided that I think this might, I'm going to represent people, I'm going to help people and represent people. And so that's when I did get started, was the early 70s and that campaign of 72.
Dymon, tell about your business in downtown Lee Summit and how the downtown area has changed.
My parents had a beauty shop that is across the street from the giant fire station that's on Douglas Street right now. That was where I grew up and learned never to tell a lie, because my principal's wife came to the store and came to the beauty shop, and almost every teacher in Lee Summit. So I learned very quickly that they already knew what the story was, and that I had better go along with the truth. And so my parents had that beauty shop for years and years, and then in later years, when I came back from Williamsville, my dad and I opened a store that was called Dymon's Menswear. It was on the corner of 3rd and Main. It was where the giant new bar is now. And we had that store for about 10 years. Lee Summit was very small then. We were educated by by raw experience that we are in a neighborhood, or we're in an area where the weather is very unpredictable. And clothing, of course, if it's a very cold winter and early, the store would do great. If it was 70 degrees and it was in the 1st of December, things were not going to go so well. And so after 10 years that we were kind of felt like we were gambling on the weather, we stopped that store. But that was when there were 2 bars in Lee Summit then. One was the Dewdrop Inn and one was the Dynamite. And those were the only 2 bars that were downtown. There were many other stores. There were appliance stores. There was a TG&Y. There was a Coast to Coast. There was Leaders. We had Willie's Drive-In on the corner. It was a totally different downtown then. Not as active, but very different. Did that make it?
Time and I bought a sport coat at your place, and it's, for some reason or other, it doesn't fit anymore. It's too small. Can I get it altered?
Lifetime warranty.
Randy, can you share about your dad and when he started his business and what happened to it?
Well, when Ray Weeda is my dad. He's still with us. He's 90 years old. He just turned 90 on Christmas Day. He's living over the Princeton Senior Living. But when he came down here, he told me that when he was on the farm in Bedford, Iowa, he saw all these salesmen come in, seed salesmen, chemical salesmen. He was working at one of the elevators, and every time they came in, they had a brand new company car. And he says, as soon as I got out of high school, he said, that's what I want. I want to be a salesman. I want to be able to afford a car. So with no background, no training or anything, he started in insurance in 1956, and he did that for 48 years. So he was here during all the growing up of Lee Summit and all those going on. One of the things that he participated in that several men did, so who can tell me Lee Summit history? What year is the official year that Lee Summit was founded?
1865.
1865. So in 1965, we had a big centennial celebration. All the men grew beards. And I have pictures of several of the men grew beards. And there was a parade, and a lot of them sat on the tractor and behind the thing, and we had parades. And downtown Lee Summit at the time, some of the other stores I also remember during that same time, the Willie's Drive-In had great chocolate malts. Hartley's Furniture, I bought my first clock radio there. Browning Brothers and Baker's department store is where we bought all of our clothes before we went to school. So those are all great memories. And I used to go, my dad had an office right across the street here where Tom Ryan's is. That was his office when he started. And I go there on a Saturday because I collected coins. And I'd walk down the street with my lawnmower money. My Aunt Charlotte worked at Farmers Trust, and I'd get rolls of old coins, that looked like they were kind of old and tattered. And I'd come back to the office every Saturday. I'd go through and pull out ones and then re-wrap them up and go down there. So I did that for several years on a Saturday morning. Now I don't even get up on Saturday morning.
Kim, share about your dad and the memories of him starting Lee Summit Clinic.
Okay, well, many of you may have seen my dad at one point or another when he was at Lee Summit Clinic. That's what they moved here before I was born, and that was the sole purpose, was to start that up. I believe at the time it was Dr. Miller. Dr. Bell wasn't in yet, but Dr. Shockley joined them. And so they had a group of doctors that started the Lee Summit Clinic, and that's where he was until about 1977, and then he went to Baptist Hospital to teach residents in the residency program there at Goffert. But I do remember on the weekends, because Lee Summit Clinic was the emergency room for the town. It was where you went, that was a pharmacy. I don't know that there were other pharmacies because that's the only one we ever used. But on the weekends, if I didn't have anything going on, I got to go up with him. I thought that was just he was in the emergency room, which I was nowhere near that. But I would sit at like the nurse's station and thought I was pretty cool, and thought that for sure was what I wanted to go into. And I changed my mind, but there was great memories there. He was very proud of that, and the reputation that it had, and I know it's still a working clinic. Some of you may still end up going there, I don't know, but he was very proud of that fact that he came here and helped start that clinic. So.
Bob, you were involved in several significant, notable pieces of legislation. But tell us about living wills.
Thank you. Yes, in the mid-'80s, actually I served in the legislature for 23 years, and for those of you that have voted for me, thank you. I also know that some people have voted for me and against me in that period of time, so it's a good time. I spent 15 though in the Senate, and the bill that I'm the proudest of, and I think really is important to people, it was in the mid-'80s. It took me 2 years. I introduced a bill to the living wills. It took 2 years to get that through the full legislature and get the signature of the governor. The living wills would allow an individual to execute a declaration for the withholding or withdrawal of artificial life support if you were suffering from a terminal condition. And then after that came the durable powers of attorney and for healthcare decisions and all that. So I think that's very meaningful legislation for a lot of us. Also, let me just, you talk about religion. The Catholic Conference always opposed me, by the way, every time we had this. I won't say anymore. So, secondarily, in '74, I introduced and was able to pass the licensure of paramedics. I think you're aware that we have paramedics everywhere in the state of Missouri now. And that came to me at a time when we were debating a funeral parlors bill. They had, a lot of funeral directors had ambulances, and in many smaller towns, that's who was used to transport people to hospitals and so forth, were funeral vehicles. Long short, so that was in 1974, I was able to do that. How many of you have a declaration on your Missouri titles to transfer ownership on death? Yeah, I think most of you do. Well, that's my legislation too. So that allows that. Now, the last one I want to talk about, and this is kind of has to do with beer. How many of you have been in the Power and Light District? It used to be against the law prior to that you couldn't take a beer or a drink outside of a drinking establishment. Do you remember those days? Yeah. Obviously, Kansas City, along with the developers out of Baltimore who were developing the Power and Light District, needed to have the state law changed so that people could walk out of one drinking establishment and into a center position. So I handled it. I chaired local government, that local government committee. So at that time, I introduced legislation allowing people to carry a drink outside of one establishment and into another, or in a confined audience like Power and Light. So when you see all on the television and everybody's drinking when they're announcing the soccer, whatever they're doing, that was, I was the one that allowed that. So, there you go. Give all the applause for that.
Dymon, you touched on your dad being captain of the football team. Tell us, go a little bit more in depth on that and what a fine athlete you were.
Thank you. My dad was Dymon Wood. He was born here. Went to Lee Summit High School. Was on the Lee Summit football team and was captain of his team. And he went on to join the Army during the war. He left before he was legal. He had to have his mother signed to even get him into the Army. He ended up being a infantry man. He carried a 30 caliber machine gun across Europe and was a heavily decorated soldier with a Silver Star and Purple Heart. He was nominated as an honor guard in the Nuremberg trials, which was one of the biggest honors that the servicemen could get at that time. He had he had a very profound effect on me. He was extremely honest. I found two $10 bills in front of the TGNY store when I was about 10 or 11 years old. And I was very happy to have that money. My mom and dad marched me down to the Lee Summit Journal to run an advertisement to see if anyone had lost two $10 bills. And that sort of, in a nutshell, kind of described the way that both of my parents were. They were great parents. What else, Carl? Did you ask me?
Did you find did someone claim the $20?
That's a good question. No one did claim that money. No one claimed that money. Yes. No, that was a very good question. Oh, yeah.